ESPN.com college football writer Adam Rittenberg with us, 365 Sports, as we head into another weekend. Even a game last night with Appalachian State winning. Baylor and Kansas this week, but one of the big games in the Big 12, Oklahoma State at home against Texas. And Adam, you just had it, the news that Brandon Evers is deciding to give up his the rest of his season to prepare for the NFL draft.
It is, although this is injury related. And, he was obviously, it started last week. He was listed as a starter on this week's depth chart for the Texas game, had made 26 career starts and played in more than 50 games for the Pokes. And so, unfortunately, you have injuries sometimes that, need to be shut down if you intend to, play football beyond the college level. I think that's what's going on in this situation. So certainly unfortunate, but one of the more deeper units on the team, as you guys know, down in Waco, saw in that game, they can really rotate a lot of players in and out. So, definitely unfortunate that his career ends this way, but Oklahoma State will certainly move forward with a pretty good crew of defensive linemen.
Yeah, obviously Texas in Stillwater this weekend. What was your thought about Brett Yormark kind of throwing out some nuggets again about the possibility the Big 12 might just extend and never even reach the open market, which of course is a long time from now?
Yeah, I think that it certainly, it's illuminating, but I spoke to some folks last week that told me that there was a likelihood the Big 12 would get done with its deal before the Pac-12, which certainly would indicate a moving forward with the current partners. If you're going to go on the open market, then you need to let that play out. And it doesn't seem like Yormark is interested in doing that. So he can put together a strong deal. I know he's very confident. He has shown confidence pretty much since the moment he took over the job there with the Big 12. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this thing turns out from a parameter standpoint with the 14 teams eventually, and obviously how that will compare to the Pac-12 deal whenever that one gets done.
Do you think that if the Big 12, and we have, in fact, a media consultant on, we've had a couple of them, Bob Thompson and also Patrick Crakes, and Bob kind of sensed that this would be a little bit interesting if they actually, the Big 12, gets theirs done before the Pac-12. Do you think that will have any impact on the Pac-12?
Not necessarily. It seems like Fox, for example, would be much likelier to do a stronger partnership with the Big 12 than the Pac-12. And, the Pac-12 certainly would look to try to continue with an ESPN partnership of some sort, especially with that late time zone window, which is still, sort of theirs to own, the 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 local kickoff. So I don't know if necessarily it makes a huge difference because they were talking to different partners. The Pac-12, I think, is more interested in seeing, what it could work out with an Amazon, perhaps other partners, whereas the Big 12, if they do this quickly, would be locked into the current partners, obviously Fox and ESPN.
Do you think that we've seen, obviously, some FCS or non-Power Fives, and we've seen probably more parity in college football, or at least it appears that way, Adam, this season. Do you feel like the timing's perfect as we look at the possibility that not the possibility, there will be college football playoff expansions, it's a matter of when?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's going to happen, sooner than I think we thought a few months ago, which is great. And how the composition of those fields is in the future is going to be fascinating, Smokey, because right now the whole goal is to make the playoff, and in some ways having a deep league works against you if you're the wrong league. So, for example, the Pac-12, everybody rips on the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has actually been a fairly deep league over the last few years. They just haven't had enough teams in the top four, and so they get criticized for that. In the 12-team playoff, I think that they're positioned to do quite well. Same with the Big 12. And then you look this year at the Big 10, you have a clear top group of Ohio State and Michigan, and then Penn State, as we saw last week, is a few notches below them. But the Big 10 in a 4-team playoff is positioned very well. In a 12-team playoff, probably only getting 2 teams in. So I think the entire conversation about conferences and how strong or weak or whatever they are changes significantly once you go from 4 to 12, because making the playoff in the 4-team system doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great conference.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it also gives hope to others that just have no hope, even though Cincinnati made the run last year. And it also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it also taps the brakes on what we kind of heard back when it was Texas OU last July and then USC, UCLA this past summer, that there was going to eventually, or the possibility that just two conferences play for the national championship, which I could never imagine unless they had 20-plus teams or so. But doesn't it kind of tap the brakes on that idea for now?
Well, for now, but keep in mind that I think there's motivation, certainly in the Big Ten Commissioner's office, to add more. I don't know if that's shared at this point by the presidents and the ADs in that conference, but I don't think Kevin Warren is going to just sit there if there's an opportunity to add more teams. The other factor here is that you have a long-term grant of rights in the ACC that's very difficult to break at this point, but will be hard to secure in the future because there's going to be teams in that league that are going to want to join the SEC or join the Big Ten if that's an option. So, yes, for now, it's quiet. In the future, I think we're still looking at two super leagues.
We brought this up yesterday, and again, back to the Big 12 and whatever they do here pretty soon, if in fact that does happen. If you're a member of the Pac-12 that's a little bit wobbly, and I'm not saying that there is anybody because I don't want that, that's unfair, but maybe there is, and the Big 12 signs a pretty good deal, and the Pac-12 keeps lingering, do you feel like there might be a few that start to kind of wander with their ideas or maybe concerns about the future and they look back towards the Big 12 or not?
It's absolutely possible, but I still think that the preference, and you're really talking about the Arizona schools and Utah and Colorado, I think the preference for those schools is to stay in the Pac-12.
Right.
And so if they believe that the Pac-12 is viable with Washington and Oregon remaining, then they're going to stay put. As soon as Washington and Oregon look to move off, if that opportunity is there in the future, then certainly that would be the end for the conference, and I think those schools would move to the Big 12. But I don't sense that there's this burning desire, certainly with the Arizona schools. Maybe there could be a little bit more with Utah and Colorado to move to the Big 12, but eventually that could be the destination for all four.
All right, I also contacted you because there's an article on ESPN.com. Great stuff. I love these rankings as the year goes on and midway, whatever. But your rankings of first-year coaches, and there's 29, and it seems like we're, this is pretty much the way it is. There's always this I guess, turnover. Let's go to the bottom first. These are three big boy programs: Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Miami, with Freeman, Venables, and Cristobal. And you're obviously not high on them, and there's reason why.
I'm not. Smokey, I teach a class. I teach classes here at DePaul University in Chicago, and I've never given out so many D's in my life after this first half. And again, there's time to turn it around, but all three of those coaches, inherited some rosters with some talent. Honestly, you look at Marcus Freeman was there last year with Notre Dame. They were on the cusp of making the college football playoff, and they didn't lose everybody. And for them to be losing to Stanford and losing to Marshall is quite troubling. They've essentially played two good games all season. Mario Cristobal, all the hype about him coming to Miami, it looks pretty similar. And they got blown out by a Middle Tennessee team that isn't very good. So that's why that grade is where it is. And then Brent Venables, certainly I kind of thought about that one. They're still have a winning record. They looked a little bit better last week against Kansas, but he is presiding over one of the all-time great programs that went through a 2-week stretch that was just an absolute nightmare of historic proportions, and the losses to TCU and then especially to their rival Texas, the 49-0 game. And so hard to give Coach Venables a good grade at this point when the defense in particular, his specialty, looks like a mess. Even last week, 42 points to a Kansas team that was playing a backup quarterback in Jason Bean. So, a lot of work to do. It's certainly time to improve those grades, but right now it certainly hasn't been good for those two, or those three, and quite a few other Power 5 coaches are struggling. Overall, there's been some really good first-year performances. Sonny Dykes at the very top of that list at TCU, but there's been some really lousy ones as well. Still time to turn it around, though.
Yeah, Napier C- had a nice win early, but they've kind of settled back to reality. You know, the one that it's a B-, but it looked like a rocky start for Brian Kelly, the loss to FSU and a few things. But you have him at B-. It seems like, you know what, you look up and, hey, and maybe they knock off somebody or two, and I think they're 5-2, and you have them at a B-. And I would think maybe, a month ago that would have been much lower.
It would have. And, they're favored against Ole Miss this weekend, even though Ole Miss is in the top 10. And so that would be another feather in the cap for Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly just either is the luckiest coach in the world. He just knows how to win. He's just one of these guys. You saw it at Notre Dame that he just didn't lose to a lot of teams that he shouldn't have lost to. And Florida State certainly was one of those. Now, everything kind of went wrong for them in that game. Certainly on special teams, it was an absolute mess. But they make that extra point at the end. They go to overtime with the momentum. Maybe they win that game. Now, they also rallied from 17-0 down to beat Auburn. So they probably are where they are. But it was hard to give him anything worse than a B-, especially coming off of the win at Florida, which I thought was their best win of the season, especially on offense. Jaden Daniels looked really good. They ran the ball, getting more of their receivers involved in that matchup on the road. So, LSU has a chance. I don't think anyone thought that they would win the SEC this year or even go, 11-1. But they have a chance to I think, finish maybe 9-3, have a solid first season. And then in the future, we know how Brian Kelly is going to be judged. I can give him whatever grade I want, but if he doesn't win a national championship, at LSU, he'll be looked at as a failure because the three previous coaches won national titles, and I'd argue that Brian Kelly is better than at least one or two of them. I think Saban's in his own category, but that's how he'll ultimately be judged. We just knew this season wasn't going to lead in that result.
Riley and USC losing in a last-second gutty call by Utah going for two. You mentioned Sonny Dykes and what he's done. What a great story. DeBoer at Washington at A-. Joey McGuire, former Baylor assistant, and right now you have him at B+, and 3-3. They've gone through a really tough schedule. They still have much more to come. West Virginia this week, Baylor, which will be interesting a week from Saturday. And you know what? He inherited maybe more than people thought because it was a coaching change, but they're teetering right now, and it looks like I think in the end they're going to be a bowl team and maybe better.
Right, and that was one of the more interesting ones, Smokey, to look at Joey, because 3-3 is not that great of a record, but then you look at what they've done. All of their FBS games have been against teams that were ranked at the time that they played them. So Houston was ranked. Obviously, Texas was ranked when they beat them, and then obviously the other Big 12 games as well, and they've been competitive. Even with a quarterback change in the Oklahoma State game, they really pushed Oklahoma State on the road, gave them all they could handle in Stillwater. And so, in the Big 12, as you know, the schedule never really softens up, but you look at their second half schedule, doesn't seem to be as daunting as the first half schedule. So I'd be surprised if they don't make a bowl game. I'd even be a little surprised if they don't get to 7 wins. But yeah, their schedule, certainly with NC State thrown in there on the road, really no favors done for Joey in year one. He's doing a nice job creating some excitement and enthusiasm in Lubbock.
Adam, thank you, man. We appreciate you always. Great work at ESPN.com. Adam Rittenberg, you need to go on and look at that midseason coaches report card. It's fantastic. Adam Rittenberg on 365 Sports.
Thanks to Adam. Very